Good morning. I'm Christine Bonero, President and CEO of Mile High United Way, and welcome to the very first, oh my gosh, and I actually do hope the last, but very first virtual Tocqueville meeting. It is really wonderful to see all of you and all your names and phone numbers popping up on our screen. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. There's almost 150 Tocqueville members, community members, supporters, volunteers, and donors joining us this morning. And we are really excited to see all of you and being connected in a very different way today. And on behalf of all of us at Mile High United Way, we hope this finds you and your families healthy and well. I really want to begin by thanking our Tocqueville chairs, Mike and Yun-Hee Kehoe. Thank you for letting me serve in your place this morning and hosting on your behalf. And thank you also to all of our Tocqueville sponsors for making today's event and every Tocqueville event possible. PCL, KPMG, Davis, Graham, and Stubbs, you stand by us in the good times and the hard times, and we just could not be more grateful. You know, I was going to start this morning with a list of thank yous for all of you who have stepped forward in investing in the work that we're doing and supporting our work with the Governor's Fund, with all of you who have volunteered. And as we began to start that list, we realized we would spend the full hour doing just that, just too many. But please know how collectively and united you all are standing strong in making our work go forward and serving our community. And from the bottom of our heart, we can't thank you enough. I have to tell you, the last 6 weeks, like all of us, has been something that the Mile High United Way I don't think has seen in its 132 years. I'm beginning to get a glimpse of the role and the vitalness that the United Way played 132 years ago when tuberculosis was rampaging the community, and Frances Weisbard Jacobs and her colleagues came together and say, what happens if we unite together to serve? Because that is exactly what has been happening across Colorado, but certainly here in the Denver metro area. We have always prided ourselves on the unique role that we play, being at the center of the government, the nonprofit, the business, and the philanthropic community. And I have to say, I have never seen it come together in a united way more than I have in the last 6 weeks. It was hard to believe that on March 13th, I was standing in our lobby talking to our team and saying, well, the next couple of weeks are going to be a little different. We're all going to have to go remote. You have a couple of hours to get everything you own and move home. We had no idea that we would all still be here 6 weeks later, and that we would be able, while the Mile High United Way Morgridge Center for Community Change building may have closed, Mile High United Way has not stopped for one moment. We have proudly been serving with many of you in making sure that our community is standing strong. I think you all know, and I hope you take great pride in the fact that 211 has been there to answer the call for literally 26,000 Coloradans who have called us in the past 6 weeks. Our team is standing online, and pre-COVID, as you all know, we took an average of 300 phone calls a day in our 211 call line. The moment things began to ramp up on April 1st, which was our peak day, we took 2,100 phone calls from Coloradans in need of support. We are now hitting peaks still on a daily basis of 500 and 600 calls a day to our 211 helpline. And thanks to all of you, we're able to be there to answer the call. We're very proud to be working in a number of coalitions, particularly one with the Gary Community Foundation and EPIC, to make sure that our emergency responders, our frontline healthcare workers, have childcare and can continue the life-saving work that they are that they are doing. And we were very proud when the mayor called and said, we need to make sure that we are pushing relief into our small businesses. So our United for Business Alliance has been working with the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity Emergency Relief Program, where we're providing grants up to $7,500 for small businesses and providing technical assistance to make sure our small businesses are going to be there when we all are getting back to work. And then many of you know that this is National Volunteer Week, so happy National Volunteer Week, and thank you to the over 300 virtual volunteers that have come forward this week, and the hundreds of volunteers who have taken 211 calls on our behalf. Please join us. It is still National Volunteer Week, and we have some wonderful virtual opportunities for you and your family as well. Our United Neighborhoods is still doing work. We were so proud for many families to deliver 100 laptops in the Globeville area Swansea neighborhood just this week. And finally, last but not least, we have been so proud to partner with Governor Polis and support the governor's COVID relief fund. Thanks to so many Coloradans and all of you, that fund has reached $14 million, and we have distributed the first 206 grants across the state of Colorado. All of that has been what your Mile High United Way has been doing the past 6 weeks. We have not missed a beat, but we could not do this work without our Tocqueville Society members and all of you who have stepped up to make sure that we are still there to serve our community. And I could not be more proud to be a part of this organization at this time. I also couldn't be more proud this morning to be in the company of 3 unbelievably extraordinary women who are leading the way in their own sector as well. We are so pleased today to welcome Sylvia Young, Akasha Abshur, and our own Jareen Peterson. You are going to have the opportunity at the end of this, of their presentations, to ask questions. Please submit your questions. There's a little button that lets you submit questions through a chat. So please submit those questions as they come out throughout the program, and at the end of the program we will be taking those questions and asking our amazing speakers to address them as well. So we're going to get started this morning, and it is truly a personal pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker this morning, Sylvia Young. I have the distinct honor and pleasure, and could not another place where I take such pride of serving on the board of Health One here in Colorado. So it is really my honor to introduce to all of you Sylvia Young, the president and CEO of HCA Continental Division and Health One here in Denver, which is Health One Denver and also Wesley Healthcare in Wichita, Kansas. Health One is one of the largest healthcare systems in the Metro Denver area, with over 10,000 employees and 3,000 affiliated physicians. I have to tell you, I have been honored to watch firsthand the frontline work our hospitals are doing, and I have been moved and inspired, and the true heroes of what is happening in our community right now. Sylvia is being led by you. Sylvia was also one of the Denver Business Journal's most admired CEOs, and I can tell you, I understand firsthand why. Sylvia, welcome to the Tocqueville Society. Thank you for all of the support that Health One has given to the Governor's Fund, to our 211 Fund, and supporting our volunteers. It's an honor to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours, Sylvia.
All right, thank you. If we'll advance the slide. I'd like to just share a few perspectives. I have the privilege of serving on the American Hospital Association board, and early on in this pandemic, we had the opportunity to have a lot of lessons learned from the front lines of one of the biggest hotspots which was in Seattle. And early on, they shared with us the need to provide childcare so that healthcare workers could be able to come to work and to have an opportunity to either hotel them or find alternative housing. And thanks to that early collaboration, we were able to implement that. We've also been collaborating with all of the other health systems who are doing equally fine work in Denver. And every day, our chief medical officers from every healthcare system are collaborating about best practices, shared resources, and where we are in terms of taming this pandemic. So I'll go to the next slide and share with you a little bit about who we are. HCA Healthcare is 185 hospitals with 2,000 sites of care. We're in 21 states, 43 unique markets, and the United Kingdom. You'll see a picture there of Sam Hazen, the CEO of our company, who had the opportunity to participate with President Trump and his administration in health system industry meetings. And because we're such a large organization and we've been able to participate in a national supply chain effort, HCA was proud through the Dynamic Ventilator Reserve Program to be able to donate 1,000 ventilators to hotspots. As Christine mentioned, we've been part of Governor Polis's task force, and we've had active collaboration and communication with all of the other health systems for everything from sharing what our visitor policies are, when it made sense to go to universal masking, and sharing ideas about cohorting patients in our hospitals. So what does Colorado look like by the numbers? And these numbers are through April 18th. So far, we've had 422 deaths, over 1,800 patients hospitalized, 9,700 cases, and 46,000 people tested. And I can tell you, while these numbers look large, all of our hospitals have sufficient capacity, sufficient equipment, and sufficient PPE to protect both our workers and our patients. So throughout this pandemic, our guiding principles have been quite straightforward: to protect and support our patients and visitors, our healthcare workers on the front line, our physicians, and the community. We've been there to collaborate and serve on the governor's task force and routinely with other healthcare systems in the area. And then finally, early on, we were able to leverage telehealth innovations and our behavioral health and wellness campus at the Medical Center of Aurora North to be able to reach out to people, whether it was colleagues, consumers, patients, other caregivers, with telehealth innovations to be able to share and get resources to them to help them during this very stressful period of time. As we look at our first principle, supporting our colleagues and physicians, through no fault of their own, many of our employees found themselves on the sidelines. In the Denver area, we operate 20 ambulatory surgery centers. And when the governor made the decision to stop allowing hospitals to do elective work, all of our ambulatory surgery centers were virtually closed overnight. That freed up about 200 nurses who were able to be redeployed back into our hospitals and to be retrained to work in the emergency department and in the ICUs. We made the decision that through no fault of their own, many of our employees, whether they worked in our GI labs and were no longer doing screening colonoscopies during this period of pause, through no fault of their own, they were sidelined at home. And our organization made the decision to provide them 70% of their base pay through the middle of May if they couldn't be otherwise redeployed. The governor's team stepped up very quickly to help provide free childcare and elder care so that our physicians and healthcare workers could serve on the front line. We also made the decision to provide hotel accommodations because many healthcare workers were afraid, after working in the hospital all day, to come home and potentially spread the virus. So we've had hundreds of people take advantage of overnight hotel accommodations. We've also worked with meal and food pantries and Hope Fund grants, which is our HCA program to help our colleagues who are in need. As Christine mentioned, our HCA Foundation granted over $1 million across the country targeted to help with COVID community response. In Denver, we were able to support Mile High United Way and Food Bank of the Rockies and United Way of the Plains in Wichita, Kansas, which is also a partner organization for us. And this is my favorite picture. We call these our healthcare heroes, and you can see pictures of generous donations that community members have made to our COVID crusaders, whether it was pizza, hot food, catering on site. You can see at the bottom, the Valor Christian High School basketball team made donations, and you can see the garb that the healthcare workers are working in with masks, personal protective equipment, and face shields. And this is what their day looks like every day, completely covered so that they're protected and their patients and visitors are protected. What I think is important to know as we start the gradual phasing of reopening next week is that the trend of positive patients has stabilized, and PUIs are persons under investigation. They're also declining as we've been able to get faster turnaround testing from our laboratories. And what you can see is from April 4th to April 16th, the number of COVID positive patients, and then the number of those that are under investigation. And a few stories that we've heard recently give us pause for concern. Patients are staying home, demonstrating signs of stroke, refusing when they call an ambulance to come to a hospital because they're concerned it's not safe. We're hearing stories about patients with obvious chest pain, potential heart attacks, and they're not seeking the resources in the community. And my message to you is that our hospitals are safe. Please don't delay if you need emergency medical care. We continue to care for non-COVID patients. All of our hospitals, not just Health One, but throughout the region, have segregated the COVID positive patients, and we're segregating the caregivers who are taking care of them. And in our organization, when we reopen next week for elective urgent business, we'll have separate entrances for moms and surgical patients to access our hospitals. We continue to deliver babies every day. And we will have elective surgical and rebooting of our procedural workforce starting next week. We've seen telehealth change how primary care is delivered. Now in our urgent care centers, Care Now, and across many of our physician clinics and practices, our specialists are using telehealth to be able to reach out to patients that don't want to have to come to a physician office. We have adequate PPE supplies, we have adequate ventilators, and we have excess capacity across the system. Our hospitals are safe. As Christine said, I too have been inspired by all of our survivors and by their caregivers. And I wanted to wrap up my brief presentation telling you a patient story. This is a story of 3 family members, all of whom were infected with COVID. This is a picture of the patient, and you can see he's there with his team of caregivers. And one of the things that all of the teams started to do in the middle picture is when a patient graduates from ICU, they're off their ventilator, and they can go to a lower level of care. They line the halls to cheer the patient as they're moved from the intensive care unit to a medical surgical unit. And in the bottom right, you can see one of our patients, Mike McClurkin, saying goodbye to his team of caregivers as he and his family members go home and celebrate the next step in his journey of recovery. And throughout this, we have held to our mission, and what a privilege, I believe, to be a healthcare leader at this time, when above all else, we are committed to the care and improvement of human life. Thank you.
Sylvia, thank you so very much. And I love that you ended the slide and the story of a patient going home surrounded by truly the healthcare heroes that we know are out there on behalf of all of us. And I cannot thank you and the entire Health One team and the entire all of the healthcare workers in Colorado, because I know it has been a collaborative effort across healthcare systems, and that the health of Coloradans are what at the forefront. So on behalf of all of us in Colorado, Sylvia, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for joining us this morning. And to all of our guests, it's so fun to see how many more have joined us this morning. Please don't hesitate to use that Q&A question box to ask any questions that you'd like. It is now truly my pleasure to introduce another dear and good friend, Akasha Abshur, the Chief Consulting Officer of Syntrinsic Investment Counsel, which is a boutique investment consulting firm with $1.7 billion in assets under advisement, including, Akasha, the assets of Mile High United Way. We could not be more grateful for your partnership and your expertise in guiding us through this time. The firm partners as fiduciaries with nonprofit organizations and philanthropic private clients to develop, implement, and monitor their investment portfolios. And we all need you so very much at this time. Akasha is charged with overseeing the firm's efforts to create long-term partnerships with clients and to craft really the best-in-class stewardship platforms that will allow us to have even more meaningful impact in the community. Akasha is, you all remember her from our last Women United luncheon, where Akasha was our luncheon MC and our luncheon chair. She is a member of the Mile High United Way's Women United Steering Committee, and this year was recognized as one of the top 25 most powerful women in Colorado. And I know that to be true firsthand. Akasha, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Sylvia, for all the work you have done for Colorado and all the work your healthcare providers are doing. It's a privilege to be here with all of you. It's a privilege to work with Mile High United Way and other nonprofit organizations. We provide investment advice and strategic consulting. And really, it's our hope through this presentation to provide you with an update on the economy and the markets based on the information that we have at this time that is ever changing, and also to provide a little clarity on how we're guiding clients so they can survive during this crisis, but also thrive, similar to Mile High United Way, and continue to empower the communities in which they serve. So advanced slide, please. Thanks. So the IMF has coined this the Great Lockdown. And as we all know, this is a health crisis that has caused to a liquidity crisis for both humans and corporations. And it's really a human crisis right now. And if we move to the next slide, what you'll see is that for individuals, we have surging unemployment. And that surging unemployment is meaningful. Over the last 4 weeks, we've had 22 million people file for unemployment. Mile High United Way is doing its part through the 211 to support those individuals, but that is a lot of individuals who are unemployed, and it is anticipated that we'll have another 4.5 this week. And that really wipes out all of the jobs we have created over the last decade. It is anticipated that a lot of those jobs will come back, but it is also anticipated that some of those jobs may not come back. In Europe, the situation is a little different. It's not as dire because the policymakers in Europe have enabled their private sector to retain employees in a different way. For corporations, what we have seen are, next slide, sorry, is earnings decline. So revenues really lost for corporations. A lot of those revenues are permanently lost. And what you can see from the chart is that at the beginning of the year, we expected a robust earnings picture for corporations. And as of last week, that has come down significantly. And that picture is ever evolving. 300 companies have suspended guidance. 175 companies have suspended buybacks or cut dividends. And we expect that will continue to happen, but earnings will be the roadmap showing one of the leading indicators showing how corporations are navigating this health crisis, this liquidity crisis. If you move to the next slide, That liquidity crisis for both consumers and corporations is weighing on our global economy. The IMF, which a lot of governments and corporate central banks use to forecast GDP, expects 9 trillion of GDP will be lost over the next 2 years. And that is just assumes we restart the economy in the second half of the year. So that means that global GDP will be down about 3%. And that is a revised from up about 3% at the beginning of this year. And keep in mind, this is ever evolving. We're still getting data, and we still don't know what this looks like for companies and also individuals and how we will reopen. So what has been the impact on the markets? So the equity markets through March, through the end of March, really went down about 30 to 40%, really forecasting a severe recession. The markets have since rebounded, the equity markets at least, because of the extreme monetary and fiscal policy we have seen from our governments, but also from global governments. Since then, we have rebounded in the equity markets about 20%. But the fixed income markets tell a slightly different picture. And the reason the fixed income markets tell a slightly different picture is because, as I continue to say, this is a liquidity crisis. And those companies that are strong and have access to capital are the winners and may be able to survive this crisis. You'll see in that blue line, high yield, their spreads are still very wide, and fixed income is still saying that there is a lot of risk in the markets that companies may not be able, there may be more defaults than we anticipate. If you move to the next slide, what you will see, and this is part of the rebound we have seen in the equity markets, is we have had fiscal and monetary response that is unprecedented. We've had a fiscal package here in the US that hasn't been seen since World War II. Globally, about $8 trillion have been used to fight the pandemic through what we would call direct payments or unemployment wage subsidies, loans, etc., to companies, to individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, the IMF anticipates about a 9 trillion loss in GDP. And so what global governments are trying to do is, how do we fund that gap? How do we bridge that cash flow gap? On the right-hand side, you'll see global policy rates. So you'll see that interest rates have declined to about 1.3% on a global level, 3,000 basis points of rate cuts since the beginning of the year. And what we've also seen is extreme buybacks, buying of credit for central banks. And so what central banks are trying to do is really ease the financial stress and ensure a functioning financial system. That is really their job. And so as of yesterday, or earlier this week, the group of 7 central banks, the countries, purchased 1.4 trillion in financial assets, really trying to bolster the financial markets. Since April, in the week through April 14th, the Fed has expanded its balance sheet. So our Federal Reserve has expanded its balance sheet by 41 billion per day. So really trying to buy assets to bolster the economy. And to allow us the time, both governments and central banks are trying to bridge that gap until we reopen the economy. And so advancing to the next slide, as we look out, what does that mean? We'll reopen the economy, we'll start in stages over these next several weeks and months, and we will try to continue through the social distancing to not have as many recurrences. But one of the things we're thinking, and we're guiding our clients, is really thinking about this not being a V-shaped recovery, but more of a U-shaped recovery as our base case, or an L as our worst case. And really, reason we are guiding more towards a U-shaped recovery is, as you think about some of the corporate deleveraging that is going to happen through defaults, this liquidity crisis will end up in bankruptcies for some individuals and for some corporations. we will also see some behavior change. What we started to see even before the shelter in place is people instituting their own social distancing. So you won't have people, as much as we all think, running out to sit in restaurants as they have before, or go to movie theaters as they have before. And that will weigh on the economy. The US economy is a consumer-driven economy. 70% of our GDP comes from consumers. So we will that will take time to come back. So we anticipate it will take about 2 years for us to get back to the levels in which we have been. And then there's also the potential for reoccurrence. And then there's also what we have seen at the state and local government level. Some of the fiscal deficits we'll see will weigh on our economy as well. So what are we telling clients to do? If we move to the next slide, what we recognize is we are guiding our clients so that they can survive through this crisis and then also thrive. So survival, what does that mean? That means shoring up liquidity, making sure you have 3 to 6 months of operating cash flow, making sure you're stress testing your operations, you're evaluating your revenue model, if possibly you're diversifying your sources of revenue and managing costs, and then avoid destroying capital. Almost all of our clients have long-term portfolios, and those long-term portfolios are for long-term sustainability. And so you really want to make sure that your portfolios are diversified and that you're also aligning those portfolios with investment objectives, and you're not trying to time the market and destroy capital. One of the things we have seen, and everyone knows, 6 of the 10 best days occurred within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days. So if you miss the 10 best days in the market, you cut your returns by 60%. And I guarantee you, when the 10 best worst days happen, you're not feeling like it's time to invest. So holding the course and staying disciplined is paramount. And then also thriving, like Mile High United Way. How do you take care of your stakeholders? How do you continue to engage in these conversations and cultivate important relationships with your community? How do you proactively strategize? We're going to do business differently going forward. And how do you take care of your employees, your individuals, so that we can strategize together? And then how do we create opportunities to invest our time and energy in regenerative ways through coming together as a community, through volunteer weeks? We at Centrinsic, we're really here. Our mission is to co-create a sustainable and generative world that empowers all people. And we are truly honored and privileged to be part of that here with Mile High United Way. So thank you so much.
Akasha, I can't even begin to thank you. I know how many times over the past 6 weeks we have called you for guidance and advice and thoughts, and your pragmatism, your calmness, your facts, and your ability to help us look forward and to not be afraid, but to be wise has been just such great counsel for us. So we are so proud to have you as our partner leading the way at this really unprecedented time. So thank you again for all that you all are doing for us and continue to do for us. Again, it has been a very calming partnership for us as well. So thank you so much. It is now my true pleasure, and those of you who know that it is an honor to introduce truly the partner of my heart, Doreen Peterson, our Chief Impact Officer, who has been by my side for over a decade, even when she got a little crazy for a while and went to work for the governor as the Deputy Director of the Colorado Department of Human Services. Doreen, there is no one that keeps those that are often left behind in our community more front and center than you. And I just want to once again very publicly state, even though he has asked, you are serving right where you are supposed to be, and Governor Polis may not have you back because we need you where you are. So Doreen, thanks for everything.
Well, thank you, Christine, and good morning, everyone. And what I can say is that we have been more rapidly busy in responding to things in our community than ever before. Just after the stay-at-home order was put in, I received a call from the Office of Emergency Management at the state. And our friends there said to us, could you please stand up 211 to be the center that people call for health and human services needs? Right now, our lines are being jammed at 911. Our health center lines are being jammed, calling the local health departments. We're overwhelmed with calls, and many of these calls are not about a heart attack or an emergency. They're really about, how do I get rental assistance? How do I pay my bills? How do I pay my utility bill? And so 211, within 48 hours of that call from the governor's office, had a contract in place for us to stand up 211, and we publicly stood up 211 as a statewide number across the state of Colorado. As you may know, there's 4 call centers across the state of Colorado. Mile High United Way has the largest call center, and in the last 4 weeks across the state, we've taken about 32,000 calls, and Mile High United Way has taken 20 of those 32,000, 22,000 of those 32,000 calls across the state of Colorado. What we know is that the calls that are coming in are in very predictable buckets, right? They are people needing assistance with rental assistance, people needing utility assistance, and people needing food security and food assistance. And so what we are doing yesterday is we announced to 46 agencies across our metro area that we were coming in with an additional $1 million contribution in those particular areas in our state. So people that really need really basic needs is what we're trying to respond to. You might have seen in the Denverite newspaper today that 48 food pantries of the 108 food pantries across the metro area are really struggling and may have to close their doors. We responded to that need when the city's Office of Emergency Management called us last week and said, can you please help these food pantries? Because these pantries are in really the neighborhoods that are being most impacted by the COVID virus. What we know and what we've heard on the news is the individuals most impacted are in our lower resourced communities, are in our African American communities, are in our senior citizens communities. And so we very strategically put those resources inside of those communities where people are struggling the most. We have been very, very fortunate, as we have our United Neighborhood strategy in place pre-COVID. We had already been working in those neighborhoods, so we already had the connections to those nonprofit organizations and to those individual families. And so we had to pivot the work that we're doing given the virus. And so as you'll see on the screen, that person with the computer laptop there is Abril. She's one of our 211 navigators that really are actually going out to families' homes right now, delivering computers, delivering food supplies. We're buying licenses so that families can get connected on the internet. And for many families that we see, they may not have had a laptop computer in their home. And so we're having to provide the assistance on how do you actually use this technology? How do we get you connected to this technology? And so we are delivering this week 100 laptop computers across those neighborhoods that we've been working in so very closely. As you know, and as many people on the call mentioned, 211 was instrumental in helping to set up the child care system for the responders, and 4,000 families asked for assistance on that child care line with 7,000 children, and 94% of those child care requests have been fulfilled to date across the state for those healthcare and first responders. Last week, we got another call from the state of Colorado from the Office of Early Childhood and said, we desperately need to distribute supplies and materials to those child care providers who are open. So yesterday, we signed a PO with the state of Colorado and Mile High United Way, along with the state, EPIC, and other early childhood providers we will be distributing across the state of Colorado emergency supplies and equipment so that those child care centers can keep operational and keep safe in their communities. We will be setting up in our basement kind of a drive-through supply drive where child care providers will be driving through our basement next week, picking up prepackaged supplies to take back to their child care center. Yesterday, our staff people were at the building packaging books so that the providers could actually have reading materials and home care providers could have reading materials. We have really been asked to step up in the small business arena, and the city has asked us to be the distributors of the small business loans that are going out, and we are getting numbers of calls from the businesses that we have worked on in United Neighborhoods saying, I can't pay my rent, my landlord won't negotiate the rent. So we are setting up a virtual communication with our small business providers to talk about how do you do this work? How do you negotiate with your businesses? And how can we, Mile High United Way, work directly with those small business for that advocacy? And then how can we, Mile High United Way, help with that small business loan for those nonprofits and those small businesses? Our not-for-profit businesses are also businesses, and many of them are coming to us saying, how do we survive in this world? So we were just granted a grant from Gary Community Investments to provide the technical assistance going forward that those small nonprofit organizations will need to build back or pivot their businesses. And we will be starting a series of virtual workshops to help those nonprofit organizations survive and thrive. In this day and age, the city is also coming to us and saying, we need volunteers. So our center has set up a volunteer website, and currently many people, as of yesterday, were volunteering on our 211 lines. They were writing letters to hospital workers saying thank you. We were reaching out with baby showers, providing more supplies. So Mile High United Way has not at all slowed down. We have sped up, we're very nimble, we're very quick, and we're very proud of the work that we've been doing. So thank you, each and every one of you, for your support. We couldn't do this without you. We really appreciate you, and please visit all of our websites, but we will be stronger and prouder and leaner and meaner in the months and weeks to come. So thank you very much.
Doreen, thank you. And for those of you who have never met Doreen before, I think you just got a glimpse of the heart of Mile High United Way. And I would echo Doreen's statement. None of this would be possible if it were not for all of you, if it were not for our Tocqueville members, our corporate partners, our individual donors, our amazing volunteers, that at this time when everyone truly could have hunkered down and stayed in their homes, which we hope you are doing, you leaned in other ways by virtually volunteering, by saying, let me increase my Tocqueville gift, let me join you in the work that you're doing with 211. We have never stood stronger because of all of you, and it is hard. We will spend the rest of our lives trying to say thank you to all of you for standing united with us. We have received a number of questions. Thank you all so much for typing in. Sylvia, I am going to start with you. We have some questions around what you believe or what you are seeing that what the number of cases will be when we peak in Colorado, and what do we know about the number of tests that may be available?
There's different epidemiologists predicting different peaks. Some believe that we've already peaked as we're starting to see the number of new cases go down. There are thoughts that we might have another surge in the winter. And that's why I think this is such an unusual situation, because it's not like a hurricane or a fire where it's a definitive time period and a separate geographic location. So I think our new normal will be to expect that there will be different peaks and valleys of this disease until we get a vaccine. From a testing perspective, different systems have different access points. We right now have agreed as a healthcare community that we will test patients 48 hours prior to any kind of elective or surgical procedure, and then they'll need to self-isolate and quarantine until they come in to get their procedure done. And all the systems have pretty much agreed that's the standard. It's not particularly scientific because someone could test positive today and 2 days, test negative and 2 days from now get an exposure. But we realize a lot of this disease is also psychological, and that people want to be tested and they want their caregivers tested. So at this point in time, many of the systems are using Quest, they're using LabCorp, and many of us have the ability within our facilities to stand up testing for patients. What we're trying to do is to balance being prudent with a limited resource for patients who are symptomatic versus understanding the psychology of everyone wanting to be tested even when they're asymptomatic. So more to come over time, but at this point, most health systems are feeling like they have adequate testing. Our expectation is that we'll probably have a slight surge in the next 2 to 3 weeks as patients that were scheduled in the month of March have backlogged and now want to be rescheduled. And then we'll see a tapering off over time as people want to get more comfortable with how they're going to access the healthcare system and in different ways, probably through telemedicine.
Sylvia, thank you. One of the things that I was really struck by in your presentation as well, because we've heard so much across the country and seen other areas of the country that didn't have the proper PPE or didn't have the ventilators available. And from what I heard you say this morning and our board meetings, it doesn't appear that Colorado is in that situation. How are the hospitals, I know, are working together across systems, whether it's the same system but you're all coming together? How is it that we are able to say we're going to be able to provide what's needed to all of Coloradans? What's made Colorado different in the healthcare arena?
Well, I think we have a system where we enter in to the state health department every day what our access is to ventilators, isolation gowns, all kinds of patient equipment. And so from a central planning source, the county health departments and the state have the ability to access if there are pockets across the state that might be low in ventilators, and to facilitate conversations around sharing across systems and across different geographies. So I think that central coordination and planning has been particularly helpful.
Thank you. And again, it has been such a privilege to have you on this call this morning and provide updated information to us. Akasha, we have a question for you. Is how do you think that Colorado's recovery is going to look in relation to other markets across the U.S.?
Of course. Thank you, Christine. So I'm by no means an expert on Colorado, but I would offer these few antidotes. One, we didn't talk a little bit at all about the oil markets because of the shelter in place, because of the lack of use of transportation, both airline and cars. Oil markets have the demand has declined dramatically, and supply during a time when supply has increased. And about 90,000 direct and indirect jobs in Colorado are in upstream and midstream. So we're going to have some impact from the decline in the extreme unprecedented decline in the oil market in Colorado. On the flip side of that, the Paycheck Protection Program, Colorado did fairly well. Coming together, our local banks did fairly well, coming together to provide those cash flow supports to businesses. And also we as a community, Mile High United Way, the COVID Relief Fund, everything we're doing as a community is, from what we have seen, one of the top from other states. So a lot of what we're doing there will help with Colorado's economy, but the oil and gas will play a piece of that as well. I think the Chamber has some really good insights as to what is going on here in Denver and then also in Colorado as well.
Akasha, thank you. One of the things that I was struck by in your presentation were the 2 points that says stress test your systems. I think Mile High United Way has stress tested every single possible system that exists over the last 6 weeks, but I was also very proud when you said to make sure, or if you can, to have 3 to 6 months of cash flow. And thanks to Syntrinsic and all of you, Mile High United Way is a very strong financial position with cash flow in order to get us through that. There was a question asked of whether Mile High United Way was part of the payroll protection program, and thanks to our amazing banking partners at Vectra Bank and all of the advice we got from all of our banks, we are part of that payroll protection program, which just allows us to continue to support our employees and most importantly to support and invest in our communities. So thank you so much for that. Jareen, a question for you that we've gotten around United Business Alliance, and I just love this question because it shows you what kind of donors and volunteers we have. Of what kind of companies are we supporting through United Business Advisory, and what kind of help are they needing?
So a myriad of different kinds of businesses. It could be a small business provider in a neighborhood that's running a child care center. It could be a business that is doing a restaurant business. It could be a business that is working in the neighborhood to work on lawn care management for different organizations. So those small businesses in neighborhoods, and what they really need is they do need access to cash to keep things open, and so that's what we're doing through the micro business loans. But they also need advice on how do I pivot my business in this environment? Like, what can I do differently? How can I do my business planning differently? And so how can we provide them that kind of advice, bring in some experts to help them with that planning. And I think having people to talk to and really having someone that they can get in conversation with, as opposed to just looking at a website and just reading things. It's like, how do you work through that and talk through that? Because as you talk through things, other issues pop up that small business may not have thought of. And so having physical access to someone to have a conversation, and then can we bring in some other experts to help that business, has been critically supportive, but I also think like emotionally and personally reassuring to those businesses that someone actually cares and actually there's people there that will actually help.
Jareen, thank you. And I think that's what we find with the power of UBA, and we also find with the power of 211. We know there are lots of places you can go look up at a food bank, but I think what makes 211 so unique is that you have an actual community navigator who will listen to you, understand, and point to other resources. I have one last question for each of you. It's the same question for each of you, and I'll start with Sylvia, but the question is, how do you believe your work will look different in a post-COVID era and going forward? So Sylvia, if we could start with you.
We have a lot of questions about healthcare demand and the psychology of, will people feel safe seeking care back in the traditional hospital environment? And I think telemedicine has been really jump-started through this, because now the government's reimbursing physicians for providing telehealth, and the convenience that it provides, I think, will change dramatically what we look like. And for us, it's going to be really looking at, does healthcare demand change over time because of the concerns of people entering and accessing a system that we believe is safe? I also think the impact on our behavioral health services will increase dramatically with anxiety and concerns that people have about their economic situation, about their personal health situation, about potential losses they may have experienced. And fortunately, we are well positioned in Health One to provide resources to people that need that. And so I think just the demand for counseling, psychological support, and anxiety and resiliency and mindfulness will continue through the next, if Akasha's right, through the next 2 years at least, while we recover and get on the other side of this.
Well, Sylvia, again, I think we all have a long road ahead of us, but the fact that we have you at the helm of Health One and know that first and foremost is care for all of us, it gives me great comfort personally. So thank you so much for being our partner for all of Colorado. Akasha, how will things be different for you?
So I think for us as a company, things won't look too different, meaning that we were always able to work virtually. And so I think that will be something that will continue. I do think as we look out over the coming years, we will start to think about how do we look at investing maybe a little bit differently, particularly in this low interest rate environment. What protection does fixed income provide in a portfolio? And then I think as we look out investing globally, what does globalization look like after COVID? Do we start to have supply chains shorten? Are we going to look more domestically versus internationally for growth? So I think we'll start to evaluate regions differently, asset classes differently over the coming years for opportunities and also risks. But from a firm standpoint, we will continue to guide our clients to think about having 3 to 6 months all times, to think about how are you making sure you're diversifying your revenue source. That is something to continuously do. And also think about how are you delivering your services? Are there other ways you can do it? How are you engaging? I think this time has given us a time where we are all at home and able to engage with each other. So thinking about ways in which we can continue to do that in meaningful ways, we will continue to do.
Akasha, thank you to you as well for not only joining us this morning, but for being our guide through this very challenging and difficult time to make sure that we are still standing strong and be able to provide support to our community. Very, very grateful to you as well. All right, Jareen, bring us home. How are things going to be different for us?
Yeah, things are going to be different and the same in some ways, right? The people that we have always been in service to are those people who are most affected by the virus, right? And so we're going to have to increase the technology needs for those folks. We're going to have to move that digital divide. We're going to have to put classes for students and after school activities online for young people and elementary age students. You know, to Sylvia's point, we're providing mental health services to our young people in the Bridging the Gap program for their mental health needs because they are really, really struggling with this isolation and past trauma that they've experienced. So those mental health services are going to explode. That need is really going to become like overwhelmingly necessary for the people that we serve. We're going to have to help our families retrain what they do for employment. We're going to have to provide business navigation for those business owners. We've just recently added a new business navigator to work individually with people to help them retrain and learn how to do those things. I think navigation, Christine, becomes even more important because things are so complicated right now and there are many things that people can access. But for some people that have a hard time, and sometimes I have a hard time navigating through everything that's available. So those navigation services that we have in local communities are even going to be more important, and we will have to expand those navigation services.
Doreen, thank you. And if there were ever a time that has proven the vision of Francis Weisbard Jacob 132 years ago of what a community united looks like, it is this time. None of this would be possible. We would not be able to provide the support that we are to the community. We would not be able to do what we're doing if it were not for all of you, if it were not for our Tocqueville members, our Catalyst members, our board members, our volunteers, our Women United members, every single person that believes in, invests in, and volunteers for Mile High United Way. You are the reason that we are standing strong and that we are standing united today. So on behalf of all of us at Mile High United Way, on behalf of our Tocqueville chairs, Mike and Young-hee Kehoe, I cannot thank you enough for standing by us. We cannot wait until we can really see you when we can all be together. But in the meantime, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and all of us at Mile High United Way are sending our love. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Akasha. Thank you, Jareen. It truly is an honor to be in your company. I wish you all a very good day.
Thank you.